What is the DSA and how does this relate to data protection? Interesting. It's your pocket DPO, Alexandria Stanford, here to explain the legal aspects of data protection in a way that you can understand. Let's get into it. So, the Digital Services Act, also known as the DSA, is a regulation created by the European Union to harmonize the rules for digital services such as online platforms, online marketplaces, social media services, and internet providers. It applies to digital services such as intermediary services, so think of internet access providers, domain name registrars, as well as caching and conduit services. It also applies to hosting services such as cloud storage platforms, web hosting services for websites. So think of WordPress, for example. It also applies to online platforms. Think of online marketplaces, content sharing platforms, app stores, cloud services, and online travel and accommodation platforms. The DSA also applies to very large online platforms and search engines. So far, 17 companies have been designated as very large online platforms and search engines by the European Commission. These companies are Alibaba AliExpress, Amazon Store, Apple Store, Booking.com, Facebook, Google Play, Google Maps, Google Shopping, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter, Wikipedia, YouTube, and Zolando. For companies that provide a digital service, depending on what their designation is, it would depend on the extent of their obligations under the DSA. And since digital services can also process personal data, there is an interplay of obligations for these companies between the DSA and the GDPR. In the GDPR, there is a provision that lays down the categories of data that can be considered sensitive and the conditions automated decision-making processes, including profiling, must comply with to process this sensitive data to ensure user safety and safeguard the individual rights and freedoms. As a result, companies should not use manipulative design or dark patterns in online interfaces. Furthermore, conditions have been laid down in the GDPR regarding using sensitive data for targeted advertisement, and those conditions should be met. In the case between Meta and the German competition authority, Bundeskartellamt, the CJEU laid down the rules on how social media services as a category of online platforms can lawfully engage in profiling of their users pursuant to the GDPR, including for personalized ads. Moreover, targeted advertising towards minors are prohibited. Furthermore, very large online platforms and search engines are expected to take targeted measures to protect the rights of the child, including age verification and parental control tools, taking into account the GDPR's data minimization principle, which is not to collect more data than is necessary. Since transparency is one of the guiding principles of the GDPR, transparent communication with data subjects is important. For digital services that use recommender systems that make content available to the recipient based on the parameters set by the platform, the company must provide information regarding those parameters. Since these systems have a significant impact on the way the recipients retrieve information and interact with the system and the online information, the provider of the digital services should make sure that the measures prevent or minimize biases that lead to the discrimination of persons in vulnerable situations and provide another option to users other than profiling. In addition, very large online platforms and search engines should provide access to their data to competent authorities so that their compliance with the DSA can be monitored. and the Commission lays down specific conditions under which such sharing of data with researchers can take place, in compliance with the GDPR, of course. Furthermore, the Commission will also lay down rules for relevant objective indicators, procedures, and where necessary, independent advisory mechanisms in support of sharing of data. Companies providing digital services should provide mechanisms to remove illegal content properly and effectively. Since illegal content can also be personal data, individual rights under the GDPR aim to strengthen individual control over their personal data when it's being collected, used, and disseminated. The GDPR and DSA also obliges companies conducting high-risk processing activities to conduct risk assessments. In the GDPR, a Data Protection Impact Assessment, or DPIA, should be done when introducing a new data processing activity. In the DSA, very large online platforms and search engines must conduct a risk assessment once a year in order to identify, analyze, and assess systemic risk stemming from the design or functioning of their service and its related systems, including algorithmic systems. As for the person in the company monitoring the compliance of the DSA and the GDPR, well, in the GDPR, the Data Protection Officer would be the one to monitor compliance of the GDPR. For the DSA, very large online platforms should establish a compliance function to cooperate with the Digital Services Coordinator of the establishment to ensure that all risks are identified through risk assessment and that mitigation measures are effective, as well as inform and advise the management and companies of the provider in relation to DSA obligations. Furthermore, if the company is not established in the EU, a legal representative and a GDPR representative should be appointed as well. And finally, the GDPR and the DSA work hand in hand when it comes to intermediary services. The GDPR lays down the rules for the proper processing of personal data, and the DSA lays down the rules on how intermediary services can be held liable. And that is how the GDPR and the DSA work together to protect your data. For professionals or legal enthusiasts who want to know more about this, make sure to follow me because I'll be posting an infographic about the DSA and the interplay of obligations with the GDPR.